Okay, well, welcome to our technical meeting. I did hit record, so people can watch this later if they need to. How's everybody doing out there? You guys all surviving? I hope you're all healthy and well. You guys getting sick of sitting in the office and taking trainings instead of being out there working on people's houses?
Downtown storming the state building.
Oh yeah? Yeah, it's
Just kidding.
kind of crazy times, huh? All right, well, let's jump in here and get started. So on the screen is just the agenda for today. I've got a couple of training opportunities we'll talk about, and then just, a couple new business items. And then our main topic for the day, I have one little thing, and then Dalton's actually going to talk to us about QCI callbacks, and then he's going to show us the new field guide. So that should be the meat of today's meeting. Under training opportunities, I just wanted to mention that the Energy Out West conference, I went to their website this morning. This is what you see on their website. It basically says that they are planning to hold their conference in August, and at this point they have no idea, whether that will be live or not. In fact, it doesn't really say that they're going to go to a webinar type thing, but it kind of hints at that. So I guess keep it on your radar. Does anybody have any other information about Energy Out West other than that? Yeah, so I'd say keep it on your calendar. It's August 10th through the 14th, and it's planned for Austin, Texas. So I suspect if they go to a web version, they'll have some really good offerings and good trainings, and if we're all still in lockdown, it might be a refreshing change of training. So anyway, and then the other training opportunity I have listed here is just what most of you are already familiar with and doing, that we've got that list of approved online trainings. You can access that from your WAP reports. And also, if you find other trainings, you could submit those on a case-by-case basis to get approval for those. How's that going? Does anybody have any questions or concerns about that process where you can find the list of trainings and then that you are logging the trainings that you've attended through that WAP reports or through the links on your WAP reports?
Seems to be going good.
Yeah, I've had very few comments or questions about it, so I hope that means it's going good. And I checked this morning, and it looks like we have almost 400 trainings have been logged. So it looks like you guys are staying on top of that pretty well. And that's just wanted to give those. If any of you are taking trainings but you have not been logging them, make sure and go in and get those logged, because logging them it's not a simple process. You have to upload that certificate of attendance and you have to answer a couple of questions. And anyway, so just make sure that if you haven't been doing that you're doing that as soon as you finish those trainings, so that the training's fresh and so that you get all the information in there that you need to put in. So anyway, but yeah, if anybody's running into any issues with that, reach out to me or Wade. Let us know what's going on. We can help you with that. But and then, if there are, I feel like most of the other training opportunities, we're becoming aware of them because people are posting them on the case by case. If you do take a training and you feel like, wow, that was really, really good, if you'd like to shoot Wade or myself or any one of us at the state really an email, you can let us know, hey, you may want to highlight this training. This one was something that everybody could really benefit from. So let us know about those. Anyway, Under new business, just wanted to let everybody know we will have our next technical meeting on July 7th. That will be the first Tuesday in July. And then tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. we are having a setup library meeting. So it'll be just like this. It'll be on a webinar. And I've reached out to each of your coordinators and asked them to send me the name of at least one person who will be attending that meeting. I think I've gotten a response from most agencies. I think there was one or two that I haven't heard back from. But basically, I've invited at least one person from each agency to join that meeting. And that's just, we've held this annually for the last couple of years where we get together and we just create the new setup library or a new setup library for each agency to start out the new program year on July 1 with. We go through your settings in your fuel libraries and really anything else in the setup library, make sure that we're ready to go. So if you've been assigned or invited to that, just a reminder, it's tomorrow morning at 8. And you should have a calendar invite from me. If you don't, reach out to me or your coordinator today. So any questions on that? If you're new to the program and you wouldn't mind sitting in on that, then talk to your coordinator about that, because more than one person from each agency is welcome. So if you want to join us to learn, please do so. All right, under the main topic, so I just had, I wanted to talk a few minutes about refrigerators. I know we've talked about them a bit lately, but I want to cover one more thing on those, and then I'll turn the time over to Dalton. So I know all of you have watched and rewatched every one of our technical meetings. This is a slide from the February technical meeting, so you'll recognize it from there. And the question there is, when do I have to meter the fridge? And the answer is, whenever it's not in the database, you have to meter it. And the point of this slide was to remind you, just that, and then also to point out that if you're just using DOE or LIHEAP funds, you have to meter it for at least 3 hours. If you're going to use Rocky Mountain Power funds, it has to be a 72-hour metering. So you kind of have to do a little homework before you go out to the home to figure out what's going on if you're using your Rocky Mountain Power funds for those rebates. So that's just to set the table. Hopefully everybody is pretty familiar with that. But yeah, basically, if you're new to auditing or even if you're old to auditing, make sure that one of the first things you're doing is plugging in a fridge meter when you get inside of a home, so that when you're done with your audit a couple hours later, you should have 3 hours worth of metered time, and you'll be able to take that with you and have everything you need. Another slide from February's meeting that you may recognize is this one. Basically, it says, what does documented fridge metering look like? And then I gave an example of good documentation, better documentation, and the best documentation that I've seen. The good documentation is this, that on the NEAT audit, we've just simply entered in the metered minutes and the kilowatt hours that were metered. So at least this way I can see that we have some numbers that look like we measured the fridge. Now better is that if I could actually look into the field collection forms and I could see that the auditor, in the auditor's handwriting, in the same color of pen that the auditor used to collect all the other information about the house, the auditor actually wrote down the metering minutes and the kilowatt hours. And that's another great indication that the auditor actually metered the fridge and that these numbers weren't just pulled out of thin air. And then the very best is that there's actually photos in the file of the digital power meter. And in some cases in the background you can tell that this meter was sitting inside the house. Or, maybe you sometimes might even see the fridge behind the picture of the meter. But either way, there's photos in the audit photos section of the file, and then also that metered consumption is entered correctly. That's what I would really love to see in every audit. But at a bare minimum, you need to have the good part in there. And you need to basically be making sure that you're metering in every home and documenting that properly. Now, I bring all this up because I've been, just in the last couple of months, I assume that a lot of this is still carryover from before we've had some of our last few conversations about this. But some of the files that I've reviewed are actually from work after we've had these trainings, and so I've still seen some of these same mistakes being made. So I want to talk about this for a minute. So on this form, when you're evaluating a fridge that has been metered, basically you've come into your NEAT audit, you've put in a model number here, you put in the manufacturer, and then you put in a model number, and you found that that model number is not listed in the database. Then you come down to this consumption section. Well, in the consumption section, if I see that this model number is not in the database, and I see that the kilowatt hours per year is listed here instead of the metering minutes and the kilowatt hours, that raises a red flag for me, and it would for other monitors, and it should if you're a QCI. If you're reviewing an audit file as a QCI, this is something that you should be looking at. What I do, in fact, I want to pull this up here in the NEAT audit. So here's a fake NEAT audit, and I put in a frigid air, and I put in a model number, and you'll notice what I do is I actually, when I'm going through your files, if I don't have a copy of your audit, I just open up an empty blank audit, and I put in the model number, and I see what comes up in the database. You'll notice this starts with an LGH, and under the manufacturer Frigidaire, these are all the model numbers that are in there. And if I scroll through here, there's actually nothing in the database that starts with an L at all. So I can see very quickly that this model number is not in the database. Sometimes you might have some stuff where, you know, you'll have some of the model number, but it's not quite there's not quite a match. Don't ever pick something close. If you don't find a match, then you need to meter the fridge. In some cases, you'll find parts of the model number, and then there will be an asterisk. That asterisk is there indicating that there could be multiple different letters that would represent maybe the color of the fridge or something like that, or some other feature of the fridge, and that's okay. So like in this example, here's a model number, and then the second to last number is an asterisk. So that asterisk means that your model number could have any other number or digit there, and that would be the appropriate one to select. But basically, if you get in here and that model number is not in the database, then you don't fill out this top part. Don't do the math. If you've metered this, don't do the math and then put in the kilowatt hours per year up here. If you've metered it, put in the metering minutes and the kilowatt hours down here. That's the way this is designed. The top half is that if we're going to use the database consumption, we're going to use the top half of this. If it's metered, we're going to use the bottom half of this. And you'll notice, depending on which one you select, it changes which ones are required fields. Right now, I've started typing into the metered consumption, so it's changed that outline around these fields has turned to the black outline, indicating these are now the required fields. Now, I'm going to put in some numbers here in a second, but I wanted to point out that down here under, if I put my cursor up here on the consumption, and you'll notice that it says label, and there's a slash, and then it says database annual consumption. And basically this is saying, you know, the guys that put this together said that it would be okay if you took some information off of the label, or you could pull something out of the database. But anytime that our state has something more restrictive than that, we've written that in the guidelines. And so I'm going to hit F1 here. Just wanted to show you what comes up. Under the refrigerator kilowatt hour year label, it says enter the kilowatt hours per year consumption listed on the energy guide label for the existing unit if one exists. And it says if you've used lookup tables to identify the existing unit, this value will be entered automatically. This first sentence, we don't allow that in our program. We don't allow you to go and find a energy guide label and enter that into this. The two options are that you're either going to find it in the database or you're metering it. So even though it says it here, even though it says it in the Weatherization Assistant Manual, we have prescriptively written in our guidelines that the only two things that are allowed are database or metered consumption. So don't let that part confuse you at all. But also note that this is where we're putting the database consumption, and this is where we're putting metered consumption. So I have an example on the screen, well, here on the screen. Here's a digital power meter, and if you're using one of these old ones, you're going to have a couple of photos in your file. One of them is going to show the kilowatt hours, and the other one's going to show the total time that it ran. So in this case, you may or may not be able to see this very well, but the kilowatt hours is 0.252, and the total hours was 3. So to put that into our neat audit, you're going to turn that hours into minutes, so that's 180 minutes, and then the meter reading would be 0.252. And then you can hit this refresh button if you would like. If you forget to, it's okay. Once you run the audit, the software will basically calculate that for you. But basically, let's see, 2.2. What it does is it just calculates the adjusted consumption, and it's adjusting for whether or not there's a defrost cycle included, or if there's a manual defrost. And you can click on these, you can spend some time. In fact, I think I put some of the information about this on a slide here real quick. So this is from the Weatherization Assistant User's Manual. So if you've ever wondered what some of those other boxes are for, you can take some time to read in the user's manual and see what they're for. But you know, basically wanted to point out that the manual tells you to, if you've metered it, put the data in this section where it's the metered consumption. And the manual also says that that metering must be done for at least 3 hours. You should prevent the fridge doors from being open during that period. And then further down, there's a box here that says, like, check this box if it's included in a defrost cycle. I don't know if any of you have ever checked that box, but you'll notice that a little warning comes up. And then when I hit OK, let's watch what happens to our adjusted consumption. So it actually adjusts our kilowatt hours usage down, because what we've told it is that while we were metering, we noticed that the fridge kicked on and went through a defrost cycle. So I think most of the time we're leaving that box unchecked because we're not aware that the fridge went through a defrost cycle, and that's okay. But basically, this is what the manual says. It says, use this checkbox to indicate if the metered consumption entered above included a defrost cycle. This can be determined if you observe a peak in either the metered consumption or the monitored refrigerator interior temperature, which is several times higher than the surrounding peaks. And then it says estimation of annual refrigerator consumption from metered data is less accurate if the metered period includes a defrost cycle. Is there anybody out there who could tell us more about how to identify that? Or because I don't really know, and this basically says that if the interior temperature of the fridge goes up during the metering, which I'm never monitoring the interior temperature of the fridge, that's really the only way that I would know. Does anybody have any other methods to identify that?
A really quick way to figure it out is, so, you know, the back of the refrigerators have a big coil grid on them, and normally that coil grid is hot. If the refrigerator is running a defrost cycle, that coil grid on the back will be cold to the touch. So if you just reach back there and touch it and that thing is cold rather than warm or hot, that's a pretty good indication that it's going through a defrost cycle.
It's cold like room temperature cold, or it like feels chilly?
Like feels chilly. So
Okay.
basically when it runs a defrost cycle, the hot gases or hot refrigerant that's normally in that coil grid at the back of the furnace are now being pumped into the evaporator coils, if you will, inside the fridge that make things get cold. So it's just reversing the cycle, so that heat that's normally coming off the back of the fridge on those coils, and sometimes they're so hot that you touch them and you have to pull away. Other times they're just hot enough that, you know, you can feel the heat. But if it's running a defrost cycle, it'll be noticeably colder than room temperature. Sometimes by a lot, sometimes not by much, just depends.
Well, thanks for that. Yeah, basically, I think most of the time you're not even going to notice it, but if there is a coil back there and you, like, I think that's a great way to check it if you think about it during your audit, you know, touch that a time or two, and if you get burned, then we know that it wasn't on, right?
There you go. Or
so,
lick it, and if your tongue sticks to it because it's so cold, you know it's in defrost.
There you go. Anyway, yeah, take some time and educate yourself about what's going on here. Click on a couple of these things, read through the Weatherization Assistant to learn about that. But the main thing I wanted to point out today is this, that if you're having to meter the fridge, then make sure that you're putting the metering consumption down here. If I come to a file where this model number is not in the database and the consumption is listed up here, that's an immediate red flag for me. So make sure that you guys are documenting that accordingly. Does anybody have any questions on this? All right. Well, I'm going to turn the time over to Dalton for the rest of our meeting. I don't know if I need to do anything or not. Have you got... I think I clicked to make you the presenter, Dalton.
I think I might just have to share my screen here. All right, can you guys see the screen or see my screen?
I can.
I can see it, Dalton.
All right. All right, so at this state, we've had some coordinators reach out to us with concerns about their QCIs having to go back on callback work to go out and reinspect it. Some of the agencies, or some of the QCIs at some of these agencies, are having callbacks on almost every job, so it's starting to really cut into their production and their workflow. And so they had reached out to us at the state and asked if there were situations where the QCI could verify callback work without actually going out to the job, so verifying it through an alternative method. And so we discussed it as a state, and we agreed that there are those times when it would be okay for a QCI to verify work via photos or some other method on callback work. So that's what we're going to be discussing today on this first part is what methods you could use to verify callback work versus going out to the job, and then when it's not okay, when it's not appropriate. And so we go to the next slide. So a couple of the methods that you could use are photo documentation. So an example of that could be if the QCI went out to the job and noticed that the crew didn't install a water heater blanket that they should have, or if they had a vapor barrier that didn't meet the standard, they could issue a callback work order, and the crew goes out there and installs the water heater blanket or repairs the vapor barrier and installs it properly. The crew could take, and it's probably going to be multiple pictures. It's not just going to be one picture, because the QCI would have to be able to verify that it meets the program standards. But in theory, the crew could take 4 or 5 pictures of the water heater blanket at different angles and bring those back to the QCI, and he can verify it and sign off on it that way instead of having to return out to the job to verify that callback work. You possibly could use video documentation to do this. And an example of that could be if the QCI had a callback to fix, say, a gas leak on a gas line. The crew could go out there and fix that, tighten up that fitting and fix it, and show video of them putting solution on that fitting and showing that it's not creating bubbles and it's not leaking anymore. Some other alternative methods may be like a tech-type report or combustion printouts in different situations. The big thing about it is, I would say, it should be a method that can be captured in the client file. So if you're electronically doing it, that a video may work. That may not work if you're going to be flattening the file and not having any way that you could keep the video as an attachment in that. So just be aware of that, because you will want to put whatever documentation that the QCI is using to verify that callback work into the client file. And it will probably take some training. Be aware, as far as you QCIs, you'll probably have to do some training with your crews on, and it's going to be different for each circumstance, but letting them know what photos you need and how many photos and, at what angles and stuff, and be really prescriptive that way, because you need to be 100% sure that whatever you're verifying through photo documentation or these other methods, you're 100% sure that it's meeting program standards. So do you guys have any questions on methods or any other ideas on how you could verify callback work? Okay, let me go to the next slide. So there's a few times when it's not allowed to do this alternative verification. And one, of course, I just wanted to bring up and reiterate is the final inspection. The QCI has to go out there and do his on-site inspection. This in no way is allowing the QCI to remotely do his final inspection. This is specifically what we're talking about today, is just a callback work order. So I just wanted to bring that up and reiterate that policy. if the callback measure will affect the CAS, so if the callback work order was to do replace, they missed like a window or door that should have been replaced, and a new worst case draft test is going to have to be conducted, the QCI still has to be the one that goes out and does that final worst case draft test. We're not allowing the final worst case draft test to be done via somebody else without the QCI on site. So that's kind of the case when you using these alternative methods may not work out. You could use it in conjunction where the crew did bring back photos and the QCI verified, but the QCI may still have to make that call at that time if he has to go back out and do another final worst case draft test. So be aware of that. And then the other time is if the QCI is unable to determine compliance through whatever alternative method you guys are using. So if you think, oh, this is great, we don't have to send the QCI back out to this job, the crew is going to show up and they show up with one photo that you can't make any sense of it. Well, the QCI is probably going to have to go back out there anyways because he can't sign his name to that it is compliant. So if you are going to use this, be aware that it's definitely going to be multiple photos. If you do the photo route, it's going to be a lot of, it needs to be some really detailed documentation, but hopefully it could save on some time and cut down on the burden to the QCI when you have callback work. So do you guys have questions on when it's not allowed to use an alternative verification method? Okay. The QCI should be documenting this. If they do this, document it on the QCI form. I put a couple of examples there of how you could do that. So like on the shower head one, the QCI called them back to install a shower head that's missed during production. And then the QCI notes, once they get it done, that he verified it with photo documentation, and the photos are in the client file under C04. So if you are issuing callbacks, and you should be using your QCI form to document those callbacks, go back in and make a note on there that you installed it or that you verified it via some whatever other method you use to verify that callback work. And then put that documentation in the appropriate spot in the client file. So if it was photos that you used to verify the callback work, you'd put them under the CL4 QCI photos. If it was a tech-type blower door that they handed you, so you verified that they met their number, you'd put it under that. If it was a CO analysis, you'd put it under C10. So make sure that documentation ends up in the appropriate spot in the file and that it's documented on the QCI form of where it's at. So what questions do you guys have on this? QCIs, I'm sure you guys got some questions. Coordinators.
We have a question, Dalton.
Okay, go ahead, Carrie Lynn.
So if we're letting them use the tactile, the blower door number, should they not technically then rerun worst case? Because if they change the airflow, then a worst case would need to be done. Is that correct?
Yes, that's a good question, Carrie Lynn. It could be required depending on, if you have all direct vent appliances in that home, it may not be. Say the callback work order with some air sealing measures, and so the QCI said go out and do this, and this this measure and this measure and take pictures of those measures, plus I need a new tech-type report showing that you met the 30% reduction. If it was on an all direct vent appliance home, the QCI may not need to go back out to do a worst case draft. If there were atmospherically vented appliances there that needed worst case draft, yes, the crew still could bring back that verification of those measures, and then the QCI could just go out and do a worst case draft. But yes, he would need to go do that. So this isn't going to be a free for all type thing, but hopefully you'll find some situations where it will work.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, be aware of that. Is there any other questions regarding the QCI callback work? Okay, as you guys, if you getting into this and have questions, the biggest thing is just make sure the documentation is good enough to make a positive conclusion that it meets our standards. So make sure you work with your crews to get the proper photos, and I'm sure on each measure it's going to be multiple photos if you go that route. So be aware of that. The next thing, switching topics here. Brad asked us to build a new field guide, and so we've been working on that, and he wanted us to take the deck of cards approach. I don't know if you guys are aware of that. It's kind of like the Arizona field guide, where it's a little more kind of instructional. It's got step-by-step instructions and not so much just information. So we've been working on that. We've got a pretty tight timeline. We're supposed to have it done by February 2021 here. So we got a few more months to get it done. But we wanted to kind of go over it and show you guys what it's going to look like and how it's going to kind of function. First of all, I wanted to acknowledge everybody that's working on this field guide. We've got Brenna Dunn from Utah Community Action that's helping us, Burl Kinoshita from MAG, Jake Leifson from MAG, Jesse Waite from BRAG, Matt Turner from the state, and Wade from the state, and myself. So we're all been meeting quite often and trying to build this field guide. So just so you guys are aware of who's working on it, if you have any questions, you can reach out to any of us. So that's first edition of the field guide. It's going to have 50 different measures. We broke it down by measure. We pulled some databases out of about 4 of the agencies and picked the 50 most called for measures. And that's how we come up with the list of what the field guide is going to cover. So, and it's a pretty, they're going to be pretty in-depth instructions. So this is the first version of it, what it could possibly look like. This could change at some point, but this is what we're picturing it looking like right now. So some of the basic features of it will be up in the right-hand corner here, you got an SWS detail. And that'll be hyperlinked to take you to the SWS. So it's showing where it's tied in and referencing the SWS. We've got our measure name right here and the desired outcome, what you hope to achieve with this measure. And as you can see, we're trying to do more pictures than words, so it's a little more instructive. We'll have before pictures on each measure, after pictures, and then we'll go step by step with some written direction below them. So that's basically the layout of what the pages will look like. Some steps will be multiple pages. We've got some of the measures, I think, that have around 25 steps. So some are going to have a lot of steps, and we'll have a few. And wanted to show you this, and also we have kind of an ask for everybody for the next big lift we have on this field guide. So we've got all the directions written out, the steps for each of those 50 measures. We're just wrapping up this next week. We're going to be wrapping up all the SWS detail, alignment, and desired outcome definitions. So our next big lift is going to be photos. We're going to need around 800 photos for the 50 different steps. So we would ask that if you guys are going to be working on any of these measures, and we're going to send out a list on the email that Turner sends out with the thanks for attending the technical meeting email. He's going to attach a list of those 50 measures. And if you guys are going to be working on any of those, if you would please reach out to me or Turner or somebody else on the field guide committee so we could coordinate with you to possibly come take some photos. That would be awesome. Also, if you just have photos, if you're out there doing one of those measures and you capture some good photos, please send them to me. We'd really appreciate that from you guys helping us. It's going to be a big effort to get all those photos and get good ones that are going to be helpful in instructing the weatherization technicians and all of us in the weatherization program. So we'd ask that you guys help us in this big lift. So other than that, does anybody have any questions on the field guide? Do you guys like that layout? Does it look good to you guys, or?
I like it.
First impression?
I think it's going to be awesome.
I think it's going to help us a lot having photos laid out like that.
Okay. So yeah, so you can picture each step has, or each measure has a bunch of these different steps. So if you're going to be working on one of those measures, just think about all the different steps, and if you could stop and have somebody snap a photo and just email those to us, that would be awesome, or coordinate with us to come up and take photos while you guys are doing the install would be awesome. So we'll be starting that right away.
For any of you that are coordinators or crew leads or anything that are on here, does this look like something you could hand to a new guy and say, here, go do this, new guy, and feel like they could get through it?
I think so. I think if it's laid out like this, like the vapor barrier is, I think it's a pretty good, if they have any construction background at all, I think it's a pretty self-explanatory.
Good. I think that's one of the things that we're aiming for on this, is that this could be a great tool in conjunction with the badging system for new hires to, as quickly as possible, get them up to speed.
Okay, that's all I had. So if nobody else has anything, Turner, do you have anything?
Nope, I don't. Oh,
Okay.
Thank you guys for attending. Is there, anything else? Anybody have anything else that they want to talk about before we end? Anything that we need to have on our radar or be thinking about? Cool. Well, let's go ahead and end there then. So you guys have a great day and stay safe out there.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.